I'm David Marsh. Welcome to Exploring the Human Journey.
Exploring the Human Journey.
Well, my first yoga experience was back in 2002, and it was not something that was pre-planned or really expected by me. I was in a completely different field at the time, didn't really know too much about yoga. I received an invitation to go to a Kundalini Yoga class, and I really wasn't too sure at first, but I decided, okay, I'll give this a try. When the teacher came into the room, I noticed that he was a very tall individual with a very long beard. He was wearing a turban, was dressed all in white. And I thought, okay, this is getting a little bit weird right off the bat. He said to lie on the mat, the yoga mat, and flop like a fish, and which everyone did. So I just tried to be like everybody else. After the class, I can remember saying to my wife, well, that's the first yoga class I've ever gone to, and I can guarantee it will be the last. The days went by, and towards the end of the week, I made a decision, I think I'll try it again. There was something about the class. And then the next Sunday I was back again. I practiced a lot of different styles of yoga since that first Kundalini Yoga class, and I have never found a practice of yoga that was more challenging than that. I retired. I was in law enforcement for 30 years. After I retired, I saw that there was a yoga teacher training program that was being held at the Southwest Institute of Healing Arts. And so I decided, maybe I could try this yoga teacher thing. So I went ahead, and I can remember vividly, there was a sense of humanity amongst all of those students that were there. There was no judgment, there was no cynicism, and that inspired me. In the early days of yoga, there was a teacher and there was a student, and the teacher would pass on the teachings to that student, and then the student would pass on the teachings to another student. And it was handed down through the ages. That's yoga. Yoga is not just an activity. It's not just an exercise. It is like a window. And yoga allows one to open that window and see a view of the truth. I love teaching teachers. Yoga is the science of improving the quality of life. If you are teaching a yoga class and you improve the quality of one person's life, you have succeeded. This is a community of cooperation, and it is so needed in our world today.
Hi and welcome. I'm so glad you joined us. Today I have on set my yoga teacher, Duane Armitage, and you are going to love Duane. Duane, welcome. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. I'm honored that you invited me.
It's so much fun. We had Golveg on the show. You and her have kind of been doing co-teaching for the class.
Yes.
And I love the way you guys work together, but you each have your own individual flavor, if you will. And the depth and the insight and the experience that you bring is awesome. So I want to do some exploring, who you are, how you got to where you're at today. And so tell me a little bit about your journey.
My journey of yoga really was a result of kind of an accident. I shouldn't say an accident, actually. I think it was a dharmic, purposeful evolution that took place in my life.
Yeah.
I had been a career in law enforcement after having served in Vietnam.
Yeah, so you had Vietnam experience, you had the military, and you transitioned into a civilian police.
Yes. And actually it was my introduction into law enforcement was the result of the economy at the time. And
like you needed a job type of thing?
I did. I needed a job. I had been working for a paper company. My wife had been working for the Army Corps of Engineers at the time.
Oh, okay.
And back in the early 70s, right after I was discharged from the service, the economy kind of took a hit. Mm-hmm. And we both lost our jobs at the same time.
Oh.
We went through a period of time when we were kind of supporting ourselves as best we could. I was doing odd jobs, doing a little house painting with my grandfather, helping my father-in-law with his excavation business.
Yeah.
And I saw an advertisement in the newspaper one day for they were looking for a police officer in a small town, East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. And I thought, well, this is something that might be okay to try to do. And so I did. I put in an application for it, and lo and behold, I got the job. And that started a journey in and of itself for me. I went to the Pennsylvania State Police Academy and then worked in that small town for 5 years. The economy then took another dip. And at the end of that 5-year period, the police departments were laying off officers.
So you find the stable job.
I found the stable job, and then all of a sudden it became very unstable. And because my seniority at that point wasn't really great enough to assure that I could keep the job, it was interesting. And there are many pieces of my story that seem a little bit interesting, I guess, unusual, but it was a very cold February evening, January or February, and I had gone in to the police station to start my shift. And we all the officers, there was only 20 officers or so on the police department, it was a small town, each of the officers had a mailbox. And I remember going into my mailbox, and there was an application in my mailbox for the Phoenix Police Department. And of course, I was thinking about the layoffs, and I thought, somebody is giving me a hint. So I went home, and I was standing, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning when I got off my shift, and I was standing in the living room in our house. It was very cold outside, and I remember I could see my breath in the living room. That's how cold it was. And I have this application for the Phoenix Police Department, Phoenix, Arizona. The Valley of the Sun. Right? And even the application, I think, had a picture of sunshine on it.
Yes, with a palm tree, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I talked to my wife, and we decided to go ahead and fill out the application. Well, as it turns out, the application was actually supposed to have been put in another officer's box.
Wow.
And it was put in my box by error. But as things turned out, I came out and took all the prerequisite examinations and met the criteria, and I was hired by the Phoenix Police Department. We moved. We moved from Pennsylvania to Arizona.
That's big change.
That was back in 1981.
Wow.
And from there on, I spent the next almost 30 years on the Phoenix Police Department. And I do not regret one day of it. It was challenging work. I honor and respect anyone that goes into law enforcement and does the job that they do. But it was very rewarding too. And I always felt that what I was doing had a purpose. I felt that way in the service. I felt that way in law enforcement.
Yeah.
But there reached a point after 30 plus years when it occurred to me that there really wasn't anything else to do in law enforcement that I had not already done. It was time to retire. So I said to my wife, I think it's time. I'm going to retire from the police department. She said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to sit in a lazy boy and watch. And she said, no, I don't think so. And so I did. I retired. But right at the time I retired was when I received the information regarding the yoga teacher training program. And that is when I formally got in to the yoga teacher training side of it. I had been practicing yoga for some years prior to that.
Okay, so you were already aware of the practice and you'd already been doing that. Then you're like, this would be an easy transition.
Yeah. I had struggled a little bit after the service. In fact, I struggled quite a bit after the service with, at the time, not knowing. But I was recovering from post-traumatic stress. And I exhibited a lot of the signs and symptoms at the time. Had you told me in 1973, 74, hey, you're suffering from post-traumatic stress. I'd have said, yeah, and go fly a kite, type of thing.
Because you're a tough guy at the time, right?
Oh my, yes, yes, and
can handle it. I'm a man.
Yeah, and of course, one struggle led to another, and I had my battle with alcohol and drugs. I first got into yoga when I first started practicing yoga. I found was very helpful in that regard. In fact, it was maybe the only physical type endeavor that I had tried, but it was sneaky in a way. We go into yoga, we go into these classes, and they tell us to flop like fish or stand in weird positions. I mean, I always thought the yoga is very unique, if for nothing else. It's not like you get into physical positions that you see people, busting out in when they're standing at the bank in line or something like that. However, the piece that didn't come right away, not on a conscious level, but more on a subconscious level, was there was so much more to it than that. That there was a very powerful spiritual message that is presented in the creation of certain physical movements of the body and certain physical positions of the body. There is a strong emotional presence in these postures and these poses, and in the breath techniques that go along with them. But it wasn't until sometime after I got into it, and the only reason I kept going back to yoga was because the white noise, I always called it the white noise in the head, that makes one feel a little chaotic. When I took a yoga class, as ludicrous as Kundalini Yoga is, when I took a yoga class, that white noise would be gone by the end of the class.
Wow.
And if it started coming back, if I went to another class, the white noise would again be gone at the end of the class.
Wow. It was like a remedy for something you were looking for.
It was a tonic, so to speak. It was very calming, and yet intensely calming. The Kundalini Yoga is the most challenging physical thing I've ever done.
So you just on Wednesday, a few days before we filmed this episode, you just gave us a brief snippet of Kundalini Yoga. You're like, well, our yoga teacher training program is a Hatha-based program. It's Unity Yoga. In the tradition of Unity Yoga, a reflection of the truth that lies within.
Yes.
As I've so learned from you. And you're like, well, you should probably be experienced in some other different type of yoga practices. One is Kundalini. And so we learned about the fire breath, where you breathe in, if your stomach comes out, and you breathe out, and so real fast. But you do it through your nose, like that. And you really build up this fire breath. And then you said, now we're going to combine that, lying on your back with your legs up and down, standing up with your arms left and right, all the different things. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we're filming on a Sunday. 4 days later, the muscles on the insides of my legs that lift, still to this moment, are aching from one Kundalini Yoga session. That's how intense that practice is. I had no idea. And then I was like, wow, I wish we'd have been doing this the whole time. Man, would I have ripped abs. So first of all, thank you for showing it to us. Second of all, we all hate you for showing us that. But by the same token, we're like, this is such a beautiful practice. So when you tell me about Kundalini Yoga, I was imagining it would be something where they say, feel the energy up your spine. I had no idea how intense that practice is.
It is. It is. Like I said, it's the most challenging thing that I've ever done. And yet, there's an invitation. Mm-hmm. There's a spiritual and emotional invitation that is always there to keep coming back. Yeah. And you establish a sense of the discipline of yoga. Yoga is a practice. It is a discipline. It is, as we say, as the Yoga Sutras say, it's the abhyasa. It's the continuous practice. Yeah. And we discipline ourselves to that practice. And with that comes a learning, a chain of learning, so to speak. And each link in the chain represents a closer realization of who we are.
So
Instead of blanking ourselves in false identities that we feel we need to meet certain criteria for life, we can build a chain that allows us the recognition of, in any situation, who we truly are.
Yeah.
It is that what the Unity Yoga is. It is the reflection of the truth that lies within.
Yeah.
And we
So
continually put more links
Yeah.
in that chain.
There's so many things I've learned from you. I mean, I had no context of yoga. Casey Miller had invited me into the program. She said, Dave, I think you'll really enjoy this, and I think you'll enjoy the teachers. And she was a part of that teaching for a period of time. She really put grounding into the sutras. I thought it was beautiful. And having no idea of really what yoga was, to me, I thought it was just the asana practice, the poses and the postures. And you taught me that yoga is learning to work with the body so that you can sit still in meditation for a long time, because that's where you find that lining up with that interior life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I believe that the asana practice, the scriptures in the literature pretty much detail this, but the asana practice of yoga was really developed for the purpose of overcoming physical distractions, so that these ancient yogis could sit, some of them for days at a time, in meditation without having to itch or feeling this pain or this type of thing. Why? Because they did these stretches and they did these movements that incorporated the harmony of the body, mind, and spirit, and allowed that sense of quiet, that calm mind and the quiet heart, and allowed them to be able to sit in that space. It was been referred to, a friend of mine referred to it once as, it is really the space between the moments that we find that meditation. The yoga is by design the introduction, I guess you would say, or the evolution of becoming in harmony with the universe,
so
with the
good.
divine.
Now, were you raised with a belief system, a religious belief system? Were you given something that later changed into something else?
Oh my mother used to put bow ties on my brother and I, and we would sit in the Methodist Church in Rye, New York.
Yes.
For Sundays, for hours and hours and hours, and we would always find some mischief to get into, and usually got in trouble. I was brought up in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
My father was not a church man. He was not a church goer. He believed very strongly. He taught my brother and I how to be good people. He always said, do what you need to do what you are called upon to do, as long as it doesn't infringe upon the rights of others. You're good.
Oh, nice.
These types of things. And he was a very, very serious man, and but not really religious. My mother was, if there's a potluck, hey, my mom's there. And so is my brother and I. But that was pretty much the environment I was brought up into. I found as my life went on a very powerful belief in the divine, not only through my belief, traditional belief that I carried through the service and in law enforcement. I don't think that without a belief in something of that nature, that it's easy to meet some of those challenges. I don't think I would have been able to meet some of the challenges that were necessary if it weren't for a faith.
Having the idea that there's something greater than you, or there's an expectation that...
and I think if I were to say, before yoga, I may have had occasion in my life to doubt. After yoga, I have no doubt.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
You know, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, all remaining doubts will be destroyed in the fire of your awakening.
No.
You know, so I have found found some amazing things in yoga. I went in 2005. I went to California. Now, I had been bothered with lower back pain for years. Every morning I got up, I was in pain. And I went to some training with a fellow by the name of Paul Greeley, who's a rather well-known yogi. He's written books. He very, very well-known for yin yoga. And I went with a training with him for yin yoga. And in that training, he indicated that if you do this yin practice on a regular basis, it will rehabilitate the lower back. And I said, at first I said, I don't think that's going to happen. However, I took the poses that he offered and I began to do them every day for 18 months.
Wow.
After 18 months, gone, no pain.
Wow.
And it wasn't that it just happened overnight, it was gradual. But I did 3 different yin stretches every single day without a miss for 18 months.
Wow. What were the pose stretches that you were doing?
Well, they were, if you're familiar with yin, they were the caterpillar, the butterfly, and the dragonfly.
Oh, wow.
Which are all just stretches. You hold them for 3 to 5 minutes. And I incorporated those 3 poses in my daily practice. 18 months later, I had no pain. 18 years before that, I had pain every day.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then, of course, it's just like, okay, maybe this business of when a teacher suggests something, maybe it's not such a bad idea to go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
There was also a time when my wife and I were experiencing some difficulties, financial difficulties. We were up against the economy again, had taken a bad turn, and went to another teacher by the name of Satchivan Singh, who was my first Kundalini teacher and also my wife's first Kundalini teacher. Hey, we've got this difficulty. What would you suggest? And he said, I would suggest you do this meditation. You do it for this many minutes a day and not 1 minute more. Well, why not 1 minute more? That's greed, he said.
Oh, wow.
He said, this meditation is going to bring prosperity. He said, if you do it 1 minute more every day than what is designated, it's greed.
Oh, wow.
So it was a meditation where you chant and you take your hands like this. And it's, I think it was like no more than 11 minutes. If you do it 1 minute more, it's greed or something like that. I forget the exact time. And he said, do it every day for 6 months. He said, you'll have prosperity. Now, he made it clear, he said, I'm not going to guarantee what kind of prosperity you'll have.
He's got his disclaimer in there.
But you'll have prosperity. Well, of course. And we began to do this, my wife and I, every day.
Your hands are together.
Yep. And it was hot, 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 hot. That was the meditation. And by golly, things started to pick up.
Wow.
Job offers started to come in. The financial situation started to reverse. We hadn't done anything else but this silly thing, right?
Wow.
And towards the end, there was the other thing was, at the end of 6 months, you're done. You don't do it any longer than 6 months.
Oh, my.
And again, greed.
Wow, it's amazing.
But at the end of 6 months, I kind of peeked, because you have the eyes about 1/10 open. And I kind of peeked over at my wife. And here I'm going like this, because you're supposed to go like around a volleyball or something.
Sure.
You know. And my wife is going.
Oh, it's so
and I thought,
good.
after the meditation, I said, what are you doing? She said, I want more.
I want more.
And he never said you couldn't do this.
She was big.
Yeah. But there was another example of the yoga making a suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay. And without doubting it, without knowing really what was behind it.
Yeah.
Just having enough faith. It always comes down to faith. You know, we can believe anything, but belief sometimes requires a defense.
Oh, that is so good. Which reminds me of the stories you've told. You've had us like act out things in yoga class, and you are awesome at telling stories. I remember one of the stories that impacted me was the story you told of the teacher and the student walking down a path. There's a river. It's getting higher. You remember that story? And then they cross. There's a maiden coming their way, and they cross the other side.
Yes.
Can you please?
That's not my story,
I
by the way.
don't say it's your story, but the way you told it, it was your way of telling it. It's amazing.
This is a story of two monks.
It's so good.
A senior monk and a novice. And they're on their way to the monastery, having been on a mission. And as they're on their way to the monastery, it begins to rain. And of course, it begins to rain very, very hard. So hard that the path that they would normally follow is flooded, fills with water. And they have to go up onto the bank of this path in order to make their way to the monastery. And as they go, they see ahead of them a young maiden, and she's standing on one side of the path, and it's obvious that she's in distress, that she wants to get to the other side of the path, but she's fearful because the water is flowing very quickly, and she doesn't know how deep it is. And the senior monk, without saying a word, walks up to the maiden, picks her up in his arms, and then walks her across the flooded path and sets her down on the other side. Then he returns to the novice. And the senior monk and the novice then go ahead and return to the monastery. And sometime after they arrive back at the monastery, the novice approaches the senior monk, and he says to the senior monk, is it not a violation of the edicts of our monastery to touch a woman? And the senior monk said, yes, that is a violation of our bylaws to touch a woman. And the novice said, well, when we were back on that, making our way back to the monastery along that flooded path, did you not violate the bylaws of the monastery by picking that maiden up and carrying her across the path? And the senior monk said, well, perhaps I did. But when I set that maiden down on the other side of the path, I let her go. Obviously, you haven't.
Wow.
Okay, that's a powerful story. There's many powerful stories like that.
Yeah.
That's not my story, but
we understand. But the way you tell it, it brings us presence to it.
Yeah, it is one that was a life lesson for me.
Yeah.
Along with so many other stories like that. Yoga teaches a kindness of the heart. Mm-hmm. And it really is an exploration of why one would say, and I like to say this often, happiness is self-inflicted. Mm. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali reminds us that if we can be happy for those that are happy without being jealous, if we can have compassion for those that are not happy without owning their pain, if we can celebrate the virtues and the accomplishments of others without envy, and if we can disregard the words of those whose intent it is to harm, we can be happy. We can be happy. It is our choice. Yeah. It truly is. Yoga is, like I said, yoga is an open door. It's a window. Yeah. And you can choose to see the clarity through that window, or you can pull the blind. Yeah. And not be able to see what's beyond. Yeah. So you joined the team at the Southwest Institute of Healing Arts some time ago on their yoga teacher training program. You've done a few of these cycles of classes. It's a long duration, it's a journey. I mean, we started ours in January, a couple nights a week, and we'll finish in August. Right. And that's a journey. It's not something you just go do for a few weekends. Right. Yeah. Right. Well, and again, we talk about the journey, and it's not necessarily something that you consider as being transient or temporary. Mm-hmm. It's something that once you launch, so to speak, or once you enter into it, it just becomes putting another link in the chain, as time goes on.
Yeah.
This is why I think I said to the class, and I try to say this to all the YTT classes, if you want to be a good teacher, this is not mine either, but if you want to be a good teacher, be a good student.
Yeah.
If you want to be a great teacher, be a good student.
Yeah.
Okay, and that is really some of the learning process that I have gone through. I graduated from the YTT at Southwest Institute of Healing Arts, which was up in the main campus at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the day I graduated, I'm walking down the hallway. I had gotten my certificate. My certificate was in my hand. And I'm walking down the hallway, and the receptionist said, "Are you a yoga teacher?"
Ooh.
And I almost said no. And then I realized, oh, I have my, I am now. It says right here. And I said, yes. And she said, this call's for you. And I took the call, and it was the River Source Drug and Alcohol Rehab Center. And they wanted to know if I would be interested in teaching yoga at their facility. And another teacher had said to me, a teacher that I was taking classes with, if you are ever asked to teach, never turn it down.
Beautiful.
Always say yes.
Yeah.
And I said yes. And that ended up, I taught for the River Source 2 classes a day, 5 days a week for 8 years.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was my first teaching experience.
Wow.
I was also fortunate enough to be able to teach a class at Sweha on a Monday morning. And but it was so kind of coincidental, I guess you would say. You know, I think Oprah Winfrey said that there's no such thing as luck.
Yeah.
When preparation meets opportunity, type of thing. But that's how it felt at the time. And not long after that, I was again. This all happened in that little reception room up at. There was a little card that had fallen on the floor. And I remember picking it up and looking at it. It was an advertisement for this guy coming to do this gong training by the name of Don Conroe. And I thought, wow, that would be an interesting thing to do. And I ended up taking the gong training. And of course, that led to the advent of the Hatha-Gong.
Yes. So for our viewers and listeners, you've actually created within that gong a modality of Hatha Yoga, Hatha-Gong.
Yeah.
Talk about that process.
Well, it's a science of movement within vibration. And it doesn't involve unique or creation of any kind of yoga asana that you wouldn't find in a different class. What it does is it enhances the practice through what is known as free-floating vibration from the gong. It is not about the sound of the gong, which differentiates between some of the sound yoga and the sound healing. This is all about the vibration.
You can feel it having taken and observed the classes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And the design is twofold. One, to enhance the practice through that vibrational stimulant. And also, the vibration of the gong is therapeutic. And it does have a tendency to alter the cellular architecture of the body. And it will do that in a way that is healing and therapeutic. It can't be anything but, as we say in yoga, sattvic, positive, as far as that vibration is concerned. And so it serves a couple of different purposes. I didn't really realize, I had been practicing gong for a while. I'd been doing events around the valley. And actually, at the time that I was doing, there was only 3 or 4 of us that were doing gong events around the valley.
Wow.
And most of that was meditation. We hadn't really explored the gong in movement to any great extent. Kundalini uses gong quite a bit. I don't know so much for movement as it is to enhance the practice. But the way that we incorporated the gong was a little bit different. And where I first noticed or recognized the potential for how this vibration would resonate with movement in the body was from my granddaughter,
Mm.
who at the time was 6 years old. She loved the gong. She would come over to the house and she would ask me to play the gong. And in the yoga room, we had a gong. And I remember one Friday night, I was playing the gong for her, and she was moving. Now, she wasn't doing yoga poses. She was just moving, as a 6-year-old might.
The way they do, yeah.
But I noticed that when I struck certain places on the gong, that she always moved the same way.
Oh.
When I struck that place. And I kind of experimented with that a little bit by continually going back to that place to see if she repeated the movement.
Ah.
And sure enough, she would always repeat that movement.
Huh.
So that started my head going, you know. And one thing led to another. And we started to incorporate some study of the vibrational effect on the chakras and the nerve plexus of the body, the cellular effect that this external environmental trigger has on the cells of the body. And we were able to determine that you could strike certain areas of the gong that coordinated with muscle engagement in certain poses.
Oh, wow.
So you develop a pattern. If you strike a certain number, for example, 4 power strikes on the Manipura chakra supports the therapeutic vibrational effect when you're in Warrior One, which was the first pose that we came up with a formula for. And then we continued to work with these different poses and expanded that. We initially came up with about 25, and then we did an advanced study, and we ended up with 50 poses that we developed these strike patterns for. And so we incorporate those in the practice. And we've trained through Hatha-Gong, we've trained now probably about 150 students to teach this, or at least have the availability to teach it.
Yeah, a couple of our classmates have taken a gong class recently, and you've been so kind to allow them to come in to participate in class using the gong, and the excitement and the thrill of the vibration and just the energy that flows through that. And then we all sit out there and just go, being bathed in that wash of vibration. It's so cool. Now, you're also the philosophy of yoga instructor. You teach that class.
I teach the yoga philosophy for the advanced training.
I love the concept of that. I've never taken that class, but the snippets that you'll share in our YTT class, there has got to be this beautiful tradition of yoga that has been around for a long time that people have begun to understand. Give me an idea of kind of the origin story of creation that comes out of the yoga philosophy.
Well, the yoga philosophy begins, first of all, the class is set up. We're not in 2018. We're 1,000 years ago.
Yep.
So that when in the yoga philosophy class, the students it is suggested when you enter the room, you greet each other as they would have 1,000 years ago.
Oh, beautiful.
Santosha, Satnam, Namaste, whatever kind of traditional yoga greetings. To try to get the mindset, we don't consider it a class so much as a gathering.
Yes, beautiful.
And we envision, to some extent, how the ancient yogis might have gotten together from time to time and shared different information. And we use, of course, the great scriptures of the Yoga Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita. And we incorporate a intense study for 8 weeks in both those books, and we use them to establish the parameters by which we go. However, it is kind of a community gathering event type of thing. You know, you mentioned the fact that we've acted out some things in the 200 hour. Well, we do a lot of that in the philosophy class, giving different examples of how different aspects of what we find in the Bhagavad Gita and what we find in the Yoga Sutras we can incorporate in our daily lives, and how these principles apply. They're universal. It wouldn't matter whether you were living 1,000 years ago or 1,000 years from now.
Oh, beautiful.
These principles that were set forth by Patanjali and the sage Vyasa, who they believe was the primary writer of the Bhagavad Gita, it doesn't matter. These principles are inherent to the human spirit. So if we can incorporate some of these, as I just said, to love someone or to be happy for someone who's happy, that comes from the Yoga Sutras. These types of things. And that's where we go with the yoga philosophy. And it's a journey. It is an exploration into understanding the mind, for example. And understanding stilling leads to seeing. And when we can control the mind, instead of the mind constantly controlling ourselves, okay, we can see things with greater clarity.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, but that is something that was written 1,000 years ago. Okay, and it is every bit as valid today as it was then, and will be 1,000 years from now.
Yeah. Give some presence to the
Bhagavad Gita.
Give some presence to the Gita for those of us that I never heard of that until recent years as a set of scriptural belief systems or things that are written down with wisdom, some wisdom writings. Give me some context for that.
Well, first of all, the Yoga Sutras is considered the science of yoga.
Okay.
Very systematic. Patanjali gives you 8 limbs.
Yes.
Okay. Says, here you go. Here's the formula.
Yeah.
Right? So when we say, gee, I wish, you wake up in the morning and say, gee, I wish somebody wrote a book about how to live. Well, somebody did. Patanjali.
Yeah.
The Bhagavad Gita is the scripture. If the sutras are the science, the Gita is the scripture.
Okay.
And in the Bhagavad Gita, it is a allegory. It is a song. It's a love song of the divine. And the main characters in the Bhagavad Gita are the Lord of Yoga, Krishna, and the great warrior, Arjuna. And it doesn't take place in a yoga studio, and it doesn't take place in a temple. It doesn't take place in a cathedral. It takes place on a battlefield.
The battle.
And it's indicative of the battlefield of life. And you have, on one side of the battlefield, you have an army that represents things like fear and anger and the defects of the human spirit, greed, lust. And on the other side of the battlefield, you have what we call the soul, the soldiers of the soul.
Okay.
The right thinking, the love, the compassion, and these types of characteristics. And then Krishna, who represents the divine, and Arjuna, who represents all of us. They pull their chariot between these two armies in that small deadly space. And Arjuna says to Krishna, I want to see the eyes of the enemy that I am about to destroy. And of course, he looks in the eyes of the enemy, but he doesn't see the enemy. He sees everything that he has always used as a defense. He sees they appear to be his relatives and his friends and that type of thing. And he becomes very despondent, refuses to fight. And Krishna calls upon Arjuna and says, where does this despondency come from? It is your dharma. You are a warrior. It is your job to take up that bow, your bow, and destroy your enemy. And Arjuna offers an argument, and Krishna says, you know what? Rise up, he says, O scorcher of foes. Rise up and be the warrior that you are supposed to be. And Arjuna said, teach me. Teach me how to do that, how to take this place, how to incorporate where I'm at in the human spirit. And Krishna teaches him yoga. And the whole Bhagavad Gita is a it's a song or a poem of the conversation that takes place between Arjuna and Krishna on that battlefield. And Krishna explains how to meditate. He tells Arjuna how to deal with every aspect of life. He talks about loving the divine and the devotion, the surrender to the divine, and how when we practice yoga, in fact, he says in the Gita, he says to Arjuna, he says, no matter your birth, no matter your age, no matter your sex or status, even those who have been scorned by others their entire life, even those that have been abused by others their entire life, those who practice yoga, those who seek refuge in the divine, will certainly achieve the ultimate goal. And he continues, he teaches Arjuna, he tells Arjuna about the divine and the demonic. He teaches Arjuna the gunas, the swirling forces of nature, those swirling forces that affect everything we do. And he explains that. And he goes on. And finally, Arjuna, in his faith, attains liberation. And at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, he dons his armor, picks up his bow, and he is now again prepared to fight. And it's beautiful. For anyone that has never experienced the Bhagavad Gita, who's at all not even if you're interested in yoga, it is a beautiful, beautiful writing.
Is it given as an allegory, as a metaphor for the human experience?
It is.
Is it presented as that?
Absolutely, and it is presented beginning on the battlefield. There's a whole bunch of talk about all the different players, and they all are representative of a family divided. One half of the family are the good guys, one half of the family are the bad guys.
So it's not given as a literal story of history or science?
Well, it comes from the great Mahabharata, which is a quasi-historical account of India. Interestingly enough, where this battle takes place in the Bhagavad Gita, there actually was a battle. Kurukshetra, there's a monument there to all the ones the people that fell there. And it was a battle that lasted for a long time, and a lot of people perished. So there is some historical significance to it, but it's kind of a lot of those writings, especially from India and China, a lot of those writings, they mixed a lot of the allegories and a lot of the mythological stories in with some historical significance.
Well, some of us were given a set of scriptures and said, this is not mythos, this is logos, this is true word, this is exactly what happened. And I feel like if you're able to look at a human experience written down saying, God said this, but if you're able to look at that in such a way that, what is the lesson here that I can take out of this to apply to my life, rather than, this is exactly the scientific data based on 3,000 years ago. The earth is flat, everybody knows that. But now as you have technology, we can still apply these teachings to the human experience. And so, but that's what they believed in that time. But now we understand it may be differently, but we can still have this understanding of our experience.
Well, I think it's important to understand, too, the value of science and the value of spirit. Because one of the things that we present oftentimes is we say, what's the definition of a scientific man or a scientific person? Now, if you look at it, you might say that science is the attempt to solve the mystery of the undeniable unknown.
Yes.
There's an unknown quantity. We want to solve the mystery. We want to find a cure for cancer. Okay? We want to know what this thing called air is. What is it comprised of? That's science. So what is spirit then? What is a spiritual person trying to achieve? The spiritual person is trying to solve the mystery of the undeniable unknown. They're trying to do the same thing.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Okay? So there's really, as far as the ultimate goal is concerned, is there a difference between the scientist and the spiritual person? The ultimate goal, maybe you would say, no, there isn't.
Yeah.
So maybe the difference between the two is the methodology.
Mm-hmm.
The scientist, it is said, solves that mystery or tries to solve that mystery through experiment. The spiritual man solves the mystery through experience. One uses facts, one uses faith. Now, then you have to say to yourself, who arrives at the conclusion sooner?
Yeah.
The scientist or the spiritual person, right? Which one works faster? And you just said it. You just made the point. How long did the best scientific minds in the world believe the earth was flat?
Yeah, it's a long time.
Okay? And yet we know, if we study the ancient scriptures in yoga, and the Vedas and the Upanishads, there was no question in their minds that the world was round.
Oh, is that so? I did not know that.
There was no question.
Huh.
So which works faster?
Yeah. Wow. Until some guy sticks his eye through a telescope and says, wait a minute, the Earth isn't the center of our solar system, it's the sun. And they're like, no, that's heresy.
Right. But it's like many other things, you know, you look at the difference between science. They both, one is not better or worse than the other, probably. It's just one has a tendency to work quicker.
Yeah. Oh, I love the
faster.
way you put that. That's really good. So in the yoga teacher training that I have been exposed and experienced with you in, I've learned the 8 limbs of yoga, if I can make my 8 fingers. And I like the way at the end of the class, you have us repeat after you. You say, yamas, and then we go, yamas, the great virtues, the great vows, niyamas, the great virtues, and we go through the list. And then you take us through all 8 of them, and it gives us this opportunity to absorb and incorporate. This is what yoga is about. It's about the virtues and the vows and the breathing and the motion. And then I love how when you're talking about the pratyahara, the withdrawal of the senses, you make this really good point that yoga is not catering to the senses.
Right.
It's the withdrawal of the senses.
Right.
Because that's where you find that true internal connection. Rather than just catering to everything out here, you bring it into that center.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And pratyahara, the practice of pratyahara, is all about the response. Are we constantly feeling a response to outside influences?
Yeah.
And if so, is that a distraction? Or do we understand that if we can withdraw, not necessarily, we're not eliminating
Understood, yeah.
these outside influences. We are not, there's a story.
Yeah.
There's a story, an easy way to explain it. Student goes to his teacher and says he lives in an apartment, and he says, I can't meditate in my apartment because of all the noise in the street. Teacher says to the student, then maybe you should go to the country and meditate in the country. Student goes out to the country. But because of all the noise of the cows and the farmers calling the cattle and this type of thing, the dogs barking and whatnot, student can't meditate. So the student goes to the teacher and says, I can't meditate in the country, it's too noisy. And the teacher says, well, maybe you ought to go out on the ocean. Maybe you go out to the sea, meditate out there where there's no noise of the country or noise of the city. And so the student goes out, and he's out in the ocean, and he's still disturbed by all the noise, the sounds of the water hitting the side of the boat, and the seagulls, and the fish jumping, and he goes back to the teacher. He says, I don't know what to do. He said, I can't meditate in my apartment because of all the noise. I can't meditate in the country because of all the noise. I can't meditate on the water because of all the noise. And the teacher looks at him and says, well, maybe then it's not the noise without that's preventing you from meditate. Maybe it's the noise that's going on within.
Wow.
You know, and that's pratyahara.
Man, that is amazing.
That's pratyahara. And that's not my story.
I know it's not your story. You always give a disclaimer, but I love the way you bring that presence to everything. You make it very relatable. It's amazing. So through the practice of yoga, what I have really enjoyed is just the centeredness, the calmness, the connecting with the breath. In fact, when we get ready to finish the episode, I will love it if you bring us into a nice closing, the way we would do in one of your classes. It's really beautiful. And I love the journey of just the inward. Instead of always being concerned about the outward, let's focus on the inward. And finding the way you do your practice on your mat, you might be able to find that's the way you practice your life. So if things aren't right, if your mat's and you're comparing yourself to others, that might be the way that you're looking at your individual life.
Absolutely. And there's nothing that occurs on the mat that isn't a reflection of something that is manifesting itself in your life off the mat.
Yeah.
We oftentimes exclusify, so to speak. We say that take what happens on the mat, take it off the mat. And that's a very good point, and that's part of it. There's no two ways about it. But I think it's also important to understand that what's happening off the mat is oftentimes a reflection of what's going on the mat.
Yeah.
So when you feel challenged, when you feel those struggles on the mat, it can be a reflection of something that's happening off the mat as well.
Man, that's beautiful.
And it is an inner journey, and it really is. I think it is important to understand that when we can make that journey inward, when we can ride, so to speak, with the breath, and we can actually follow the breath. Where's it going? And when we can use that inner witness of what is happening within us, and not so much what kind of reflection that has on anything outside of us. I think we have a tendency to be able to get lost when we are on the mat, and that becomes an exploration, kind of trying to find that path. Okay, and understanding where we are. You know, the pilgrim who is on a journey of enlightenment, trying to find himself, trying to find who he is, and comes across a river, and the river is very wide, and the current's very fast, and the water's very deep. And the pilgrim looks upstream and downstream. He can't see any place to ford the river, and he's trying to find himself. He's seeking the Atman in himself, and he looks across on the other side of the river, and he sees a yogi. And the yogi is in meditation. And the pilgrim calls across the river. And he says to the yogi, he says, "Excuse me, sir." He says, "I'm on a journey of enlightenment. I'm trying to find myself. I've come across this river, this barrier, and the current's very deep, or the current's very fast, and the water's very deep. And I don't see any place to ford. Please, can you tell me how I might get to the far side of the river?" For a long time, the yogi doesn't look up. Finally, she looks up. She looks him in the eye. She looks upstream. She looks downstream. She looks across once again, looks him in the eye, and she says, "Young man, you are already on the far side of the river."
Wow. Man, you have so many amazing stories that you know and that you tell. It's amazing. And I love that. You connect, you make those points.
Yeah.
And people are like, "Oh, I get it." And you're like, "Yep, that's
We
it."
run, so many of us, we run through life chasing the mirage.
Yeah.
It's going to be water this time. That puddle in the road, it's going to be water this time.
So good.
And we get there and it never is. But we look up and guess what? There's another puddle. In life, there's three roads that we can follow. Desire, that's chasing the illusion.
Yep.
Deception, and devotion. The road of devotion is not the easiest. The road to devotion is filled with challenges. But the difference between the three is the karma that you collect along the way. It's yoga.
Yeah, so good. Thank you for being who you are and staying authentic to your journey. I love that you've done service, whether it's military or police service. Now you're in yoga. You're just in service. How can I help other people in whatever that is? And now you're taking that and you're able to help other people on their journey find that grounded, that centeredness, find that divinity within, rather than that separateness, finding that space to where we are connected, and give presence to the divinity and give presence to kind of philosophically how you feel that we fit into this divine creation.
There is a harmony within the entire cosmos. As we go through this journey, and this is just a piece, okay? As we go through this journey, we develop a pattern, so to speak, for want of a better way of saying it. Let's call it a vibration.
Okay.
And you have this finely tuned vibration of the infinite, the cosmos. And then you have these rather erratic Om-generated vibrations of each and every one of us. What we are trying to do, what we are trying to accomplish in learning the lessons, the karmic lessons, and on this karmic journey, is we are trying to take our vibrations, our patterns, so to speak, our energetic patterns, and we want to make them totally in harmony with the tapestry of the cosmos. And then we become a part of that tapestry, okay? Until we do that, we will repeat over and over again until we have refined that pattern or that harmony to the point where it becomes part of the tapestry.
Wow.
And when we become part of the tapestry, that's bliss. That's bliss.
Samadhi.
Yeah, absolutely. That is bliss. In the Bhagavad Gita talks about that. The Yoga Sutras talk about that. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says, look, become pure in body, mind, and spirit. Become pure in your words, your actions, and your thoughts. And of course we say, well, I can become pure in my actions. I can become pure in my words. But I have no control over the thoughts. And Patanjali says, no, no, no. He says, look, the moon does not eliminate itself. The moon must be eliminated by the sun. Okay?
Yeah.
The mind does not eliminate itself. The mind is either eliminated by ego or spirit. When the mind is eliminated by ego, your thoughts are impure. When the mind is eliminated by the spirit, your thoughts are pure. And that's liberation.
Yeah.
When the mind is eliminated by the spirit, then you're no longer adversely affected by the swirling forces of nature. You are released from the karma, and you become part of the tapestry of the cosmos, the universe.
Beautiful.
And that's what we're all striving for.
Yeah.
You know, in our own little way, we're seeking something. Well, most of the time, Yogananda said, it may take 50,000 incarnations before we get there. But we're all seeking in our own little way that which liberates us.
That's good.
Okay? We're not always on the right path. And what Patanjali and the Bhagavad Gita say is, we'll show you the way. We'll show you the path. You know, Gandhi was asked by, I believe, if I remember correctly, one of his jailers. His jailer said, everything about you is manifested physically. You walked across India. You are very vigorous person, how can you tolerate being in prison, being confined like this? And Gandhi said to his jailer, I have my God and I have my Gita. I need nothing else.
Wow.
And when I teach the philosophy, what I suggest to the students is this. You take the Yoga Sutras, that's your science book. Start at the first chapter and go through it to the end. Now, when you take the Bhagavad Gita, the first time you read it from the beginning to the end, just for the song, and become familiar with it. After that, you don't need to read it from the beginning to the end again. When you have a situation that comes up in your life, when you have a problem, when you need a solution, take the Bhagavad Gita and open it. It doesn't matter where, open it. And see if you don't find a verse in there that deals specifically with that problem.
Amazing.
And that's another thing that Gandhi said.
Yeah.
He said, anytime in my darkest hours, when I had to make a decision, I wasn't sure what to do, I opened my Gita, and there it was.
Wow, that's good. As we close, I would love it if you would honor us all with the opportunity to see and feel how you end a yoga class with your practice.
We call and response?
Oh, I would love it.
Sure. Well, we'll come into our...
Oh, can you do lotus style on a chair?
Well, I can.
Because if there's one thing at the very first class I noticed is Duane sits in lotus style for like forever. He actually crosses his feet up, which I can't still do, and I've been doing this forever, and it's amazing. And so I was like, I got to learn how to do that.
I can. Well, this way.
It's amazing. I mean, that's not bad for a guy that's, what, 120, 121? How old are you now?
Oh, I'm getting to be at least 100 and whatever.
You look great. Look at this. This is amazing. Look at his flexibility.
This, again, I wanted to do this. I wanted to be able to sit this way because one of the books I read, this was a good way to be able to achieve a meditative state. And that's why the yogi sat like this. And boy, I really couldn't do it. And then it was suggested to me that you do it little by little. Get 1 foot up for 10 seconds every day until you can do it for 20 seconds, until you can do it for 30 seconds. When you've gotten to that point, then put the other foot up, do the same thing again. So it took me a year. After a year, I was able to sit for a period of time, and now I can sit for a long time.
Yeah.
So
beautiful.
Anyway, we come into a comfortable seated position. Let's bring the hands onto the knees, palms up, or in a mudra of your choice. Now we're going to engage the core just a little bit, and take a moment to let the sit bones anchor into the earth. You know, we're organic creatures. Our connection with the earth is vital. The earth sustains us. The earth provides us with everything we need. So allow that sense of the organic connection with the earth. And invite that into the body and let it rise. Enhancing, elongating the natural curves in the spine. Let the shoulders just drift to the right and left and linger. The crown of the head is lifted, the chin is tucked in, the eyes are closed. When the mind is well trained to address solely in Atman, without wanting anything, then you are established in yoga. The well-trained mind of the yogi, concentrating on the self, is as steady as a flame in a windless place. Disciplined by yoga practices, the mind becomes calm and tranquil, and the individual self beholds the true self and is completely satisfied. Call and response. Yama.
Yama.
The great vows.
The great vows.
Niyama.
Niyama.
The great virtues.
The great virtues.
Asana.
Asana.
Movement.
Movement.
Pranayama.
Pranayama.
breath regulation and control.
Breath regulation and control.
Pratyahara,
Pratyahara.
withdrawal of the senses.
Withdrawal of the senses.
Dharana,
Dharana.
single-pointed focus.
Single-pointed focus.
Jhana,
Jhana.
meditation.
Meditation.
Samadhi,
Samadhi.
liberation or absoluteness.
Liberation or absoluteness.
Draw the hands together at heart center, prayer pose, Anjali Mudra. Seek now a space deep within the heart. Fill that space with a sense of peace and serenity. Carry it with you throughout the rest of your day and today and into the days that follow. And be ever mindful, please, that learning to love oneself is the beginning of a lifelong romance. Let us end our time together for this day with one resonant round of Om. Inhale deeply. Namaste.
Namaste.
I'm David Marsh, and you've been watching Exploring the Human Journey on YouTube as a video and listening as a podcast. If you would like to help continue the conversation, please consider supporting us by visiting patreon.com, where you can support us on a monthly basis and get extra bonus content. For as little as $1 a month, you can make this show sustainable and help continue spiritual consciousness. You can also help by following us on Facebook and Instagram. For more information about the show, find us online at exploringthehumanjourney.com.